What's going on, YouTube? This is your melanated warrior, Hayru Heinous, and this is another installment of Facts Over Feelings. Leave your feelings at the door so we can get to the facts and we right back at it. Well, technically we're not really right back at it because I've been on kind of like a little mini vacation, if you want to call it that, but I apologize for the hiatus. You know, some personal issues, you know, when they grow in energy and momentum, you definitely got to take some time out to deal with them. But what we do know is on this platform, we specialize in doing what? Making sure that we give you critical information so that you're able to make well-informed decisions. That's what this platform is truly all about. And we're not going to veer off of that. We're not going to waver. That's what we're going to remain committed to, because we know one of two things also, too, right? Which is that people have their own problems, too, as well. Everybody has a story. And also, is equally important, if not more important, we know that this realm is ruled by very vile, evil, and corrupt energy. So how can you get away from it? How can you get around it? You would only have to go through it. And what's so remarkable, and ironically enough, the people who proclaim to be individuals of faith are the same individuals who do what? Sit up there and are the most shocked and are the most surprised, when they're supposed to be the most ready. You know, oh, it's getting from bad to worse. Like, what? Come on, man. You, from your vantage point, you should already know it's been seemed like an apocalyptic energy for someone in some parts of the world who are actually receiving the brunt end of quote unquote Western civilization. So we're gonna take a look at that, because this is an animal, and you know, there are gonna be people from the outside looking in, and I hope that you can really shed all of those preconceived notions of what you think all this is about, and really look at it for what it is. And some of the language, you know, you might not like, but hey, it just is what it is. You're gonna have to deal with it. We're gonna have to deal with this truth. We're gonna have to deal with these facts. We just gonna have to deal with them. And so, you know, as we get started, you know, like I said, shouts out to you melanated gods and goddesses. Good energy, positive vibes. Let's rock. All right, now my thing is this: when you have the time, so some of us don't even have the luxury to do something like this, which is to, you know, navigate what I call those conscious community waters, or even, you know, if you're well-rounded, I'm thinking one of the things that you do is that you also entertain ideas and thoughts from people from all persuasions or all backgrounds. You don't want a myopic view. You don't want to be narrow-minded. All right, and so I hope that you are. But what's crazy is that a lot of times we still miss the big picture, because no matter how much on the fringe an individual seems to be, or no matter how much of a revolutionary that individual seems to be, and now it's not their fault, it's just something that I have seen. It's for these people that, you know, we know are genuine about caring for their people. One thing that they do unwittingly, now listen to what I'm saying, internalize this. One thing that they do unwittingly is take a side to an argument. An argument that is fraudulent, or an argument that should obviously never happen or should not even exist in the first place. Do you see what I'm saying? And I'm going to use science and argument, you know, those are going to be interchangeable terms for the purposes of actually clarifying what I'm trying to prove right now. At this point, I'm telling you, this is something that should wake you or stir you. Two sides to an argument. It's just, I'm gonna give you a perfect example. A long time ago, and I remember it because it was such a petty experience, right? So I end up going over a friend's house. There, as soon as I get in there, they're arguing, screaming. You know, it's not a real bad argument, but you can tell that they're obviously visibly upset, and they're arguing over breakfast. It's like, you know, she cooked too much of the eggs or something for somebody else, and didn't leave him as much, and all of this different stuff. And why does he think cereal, or she thinks she arguing that cereal can help? It was stupid. Trust me, it was stupid. And that's the point. So when I came in there, they were like, well, hey, what you think? You know, she should have done this and did it, or he should have did this and that. And I'm listening to it, and I'm not even really listening because it's so frivolous. But the point is like, when they were like, what's more believable? And they asked me, okay, whose side do you take? I'm like, the argument is stupid. Why should I be forced to take a side to a stupid argument? Why? That don't make no sense. And that's what I'm saying to you. We're not questioning the argument, or we're not questioning the science. Remember when we talked about how that iconic scene with the character played by Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie Django, how that was of primary importance? And why was it important? Is because it showcased to you that what the Blanco culture does all throughout history, in every era, ERA, and in every area of life activity, is justify their actions through a science. It's justify their actions through a science. And so when it came to so-called narrative of slavery, it was, oh, you were docile. You wanted to be in a position of servitude. You wanted to serve individuals. This is why, remember, he showed the skull and he said, like, look, the science of phrenology states. And this is incredible, because most people, if they're not aware with phrenology, you know that this is a pseudoscience. Okay? But most people watching the movie may or may not have known that. That science was a science that stated that intelligence was associated to bumps on the skull. Okay, obviously it's fake, it's garbage. We know modern science knows that now, but that's what the science that they were using, or one of the many sciences that they were using in order to justify your enslavement, if you go with the narrative. You see, so this is incredible, because then, like we said before, juxtapose that to your positioning, same thing, just different era. You have a man who's in a position of authority. Okay, you pick his cotton, you plant his cotton, you wash his clothes, you serve his meals. Okay, and he's in a position of authority. Why not believe him? Like I said, juxtapose that or place that right next to ours. What? We go to his jobs and her jobs. All right? We wear them clothes, we wear them shoes, we use their products. How are you going to say that they're wrong when you engage in so much of their science? Because you can't tell me them soaps and everything that you use with them 12, 13 letter words is good for your skin. I don't care what you're talking about. But you believe it's science. This will make you clean. Black man, black woman, put these 30, 50, 60 chemicals from this soap in your skin. But this is what I'm talking about. So it's science, and this is what's important for you. So the science of phrenology, obviously, we know is a pseudoscience, but the point being is that, look, it just goes to show you they do this in every area, and they do this all the time, and they won't stop until the agenda is complete. That's what you need to know. So, as I said before, let's recap. As we are going through navigating these waters, we understand that we find a common denominator, that people are taking sides, and they're not arguing whether or not the actual science is correct, whether it has any viability, whether it is even credible. And this is what we need to do. So when we take a look at what we have seen is that these individuals will create a science, and it will pose as if it is philanthropic in nature, or it has a humanitarian agenda. But the reality of it is nothing but an act of war. They have weaponized everything. And that's what you need to understand. So how can an individual really embrace what you're saying, or really embrace the change that you are embracing, when they still agree with the science? Do you see what I'm saying? Then you ultimately you're going to get into arguments. You're going to have a disagreement of some kind. Remember what their sciences are: political sciences, the social sciences, the health sciences. Everything is a science, because science literally translates into the need to know. So think how powerful that is. Their need to know trumps or it supersedes your empirical evidence from your experiences, and also from what you've been able to deduce through critical thinking and reasoning. They're saying minds trumps that. I don't care how long you've been studying, nigga, or what schools you went to, what degrees you got, if you got any degrees to even speak of. My outlook, it sounds the best, because it is the best, and the scientific community says it's the best. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. So what we're finna get into, we're gonna read some articles now. These articles are very, very, they should be soul stirring to an individual, because what is going to show, and mind you, like we said, because we have analytical skills to speak of, and because we know what one rule is that if we know what we understand, that what we have read, then we can read. If you do not, then you can't read at all. Reading comprehension is key. So we're going to read out some excerpts of this article, and what we're going to do, and it's not lengthy, but it's enough to where we're going to split it up, and we're going to analyze what we're reading as we read. Okay, so let's read. Now, this title is Too White and Middle Class. XR's chaotic protests show exactly why people of color rarely get involved in eco-activism. This was published by Reuters. The author is Tom Nicholson, all right, or the writer, all right. This is the article right here. Let's read. Now, despite being the journalistic equivalent of driving Miss Daisy, by the end of the road trip, so he's on this road trip, I learned much about America's enduring racial fault lines, including the contentious notion of liberal racism, courtesy of a little gem Suzanne dug up in Urban Outfitters book section. So he said this liberal racism, because liberals, we are the world, you know what a liberal is, right? But they're using, they have an agenda. This was so cool. You got this article blew me away. Because what we're doing, we're seeing from their perspective. Which, this is the only, like when we come out and say it, we're racist, or we're this, or we're that, and the other. And they're showing you this is exactly what we're doing. They're just taking a different road to the same end. They're softly killing you. You see, they're saying that, oh, we are the world, we're all in the same boat, and, we need to save the planet, or we need to do this, or there's climate change. We need to save the planet. We need to block out the sun. So they're getting to the same route where you have those who are the elite and the world will say, oh, yeah, we need to block out the sun. Things got to change. The world's using too many resources, the population control, et cetera, et cetera. So you look at them because they're just saying it outright. And you're like, oh, I got a problem with the Bill Gates and this and that and the other, and all these other individuals. But you don't have a problem with the liberals coming softly. Oh, yeah, it's getting bad out here. We got to block that sun out. Climate change. So the point being, before we get deep off into this, is like we're saying, how can you agree with the science that is diametrically opposed to your existence? How can you agree with the science that states that the sun causes cancer, or it defeats life? Number one reason for aging, that's what they say. But if we as black people know through empirical data, through experience, that we can look younger as we age or remain looking young, then why is the sun such a bad thing? So this is what I'm saying. You can't embrace a science that is actually against you at the fundamental level. All right? In your existence. And you're embracing it, and you're just taking a side of an argument. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, climate changes. Yeah, that's got to be a real thing. They're saying it's getting warmer. Remember, he's in a position of authority, so that's what makes that argument credible. So he's saying it's getting warmer. Let's continue to keep reading, though, because we just getting started, all right? We ain't got that much time, so we want to make a lot of this stuff work. David, I've got just a thing for you. So this is what Suzanne says. So, obviously the individual that's accompanying him on this road trip. Cried Suzanne. Waved high above her head like a pair of knickers at a Beatles gig was a copy of Stuff White People Like, a definitive guide to the unique taste of millions by Christian Lander. From the title alone, I knew I was going to love this one. Stuff's conceit. So he gets this book from Suzanne. She gives him this book that's titled Stuff White People Like, a definitive guide to the unique taste of millions by Christian Lander, okay? So then he goes on to say, Stuff's conceit, or its angle, or what it was, proposing, is that trendy urban white liberals have a distinctly bourgeois, right-on, slightly left-off center appreciation of achingly worthy middle-class goodies. So, the bourgeois is really typical of the middle class, saying, like, we like these things, or we're justifying what we like because of this. So it's just another route that they're taking. You see what I'm saying? It's just a softer route to the end game. It's just really all it is. Okay? And so we're going to move on because, like I said, we're not going to read all these things. We're going to just read enough for you to get the gist of it and also obviously not lose integrity at the same time. Now, he goes on to say that the global climate change movement must rank as the whitest, non-racist mass movement for a generation, which begs the question, if most of the planet isn't white, but the most severe impacts of climate change have historically affected everywhere outside of Europe disproportionately, then why does XR have all the ethno-diversity of a Guns N' Roses concert? So it's like, if this disproportionately affects black people, then why is not your organization dang near at least 50% black, at least 20% black? Why ain't black people rolling with you on this climate change shit? Even innately, you don't even know why you're not siding with these Euros or these Blancos with that science. But you know in your soul, your cosmic reasoning, know why. Because it knows that you're connected to the sun. This would be stupid for you to be going out there talking about we don't need you, I don't need you. When the basis of your immunity is based off of your connection with the central power source. So it says the answer may lie well in the question. In 1900, a quarter of the world's population resided in Europe, some 3 times out of Africa at the time. But by 2050, it's predicted that just 7% of the world's population will live in Europe and will equal 1/3 of Africa's population. Despite the right's constant ranting and raving about immigration, predominantly white nations are seeing declining populations thanks to the rise of the elderly and falls in fertility. And we're going to continue to keep moving on. It's interesting what he says about Lander, too. Excuse me. He says, but following a week in which the Extinction Rebellion activists generated huge publicity for the climate change cause, I was reminded of another stuffed target, ethnic diversity. While Lander notes that, remember, Lander is the writer of this book, he says, the most important role that black friends can play in white culture is that they can be used as physical evidence that white people are not racist. That's the only thing you can be, as a token. When we make this, what we're doing is we're just not including racism, but the agenda is the same. Because what you see is that Like they said, you're still disproportionately affected. Even if they tried to resolve these issues, oh, well, climate change will do this, will do that. Unless you were just a ward of the state, how do you benefit when those changes are made? Again, let me say this. Unless you are a ward of the state, how do you benefit when those changes are made? You better think about that. You see what I'm saying? So, look, we go off further into it. It says, this month it was reported that the U.S.'s white population declined for the first time ever, with the 2020 census finding that it has now fallen below 60%. In 1951, 3 years after the British Nationality Act was passed, the ethnic minority population of England and Wales was little more than 100,000. Today, out of a population of 56 million in England and Wales, some 8 million people identify as coming from an ethnic minority. When I look out into the world and see a sea of black, brown, yellow, and red faces looking back at me, I glory in the wondrous nature of human diversity and the sheer size of the human race. But for many white people, not just on the paranoid right, but also on the rational left of center climate change movement, I suspect they see a world that doesn't look like them. So he said, look, check this out. But for many white people, not just on the paranoid right, so the right wing and the Trumpers and all this, what they're talking about, but also in the rational left of center. So the leftists, the liberals, and all that different stuff. The climate change movement. Suspect that they see a world that doesn't look like them, and their race in decline that fills them with existential dread. Their existence is compromised. Because you got to understand all of these things. Even when they weren't talking this weird world stuff, we knew that they were making a concerted effort through biological and chemical warfare, compulsory vaccinations, and all of these things to eliminate people of color. And then after all this that you've done, you poison the water, poison the air. You control the healthcare system. They still are creeping up. Their numbers are still rising. And like he said, so no matter what ideological stance they take, if you for Trump or you're not racist or you for climate change and all that, the end game is still the same. I am killing you niggas. I'm sorry. I had to bring that back because, man, you got to understand how crazy, because you believe the science. Remember what we said? Science picks up where religion left off and is even more powerful. It is not as equally as powerful. It is more powerful because it is science that got you to stay in your homes. It is science that changes the laws, because science is what is the catalyst for the laws. You look at this political framework, like we said, it has been turned upside down on its head because of this pandemic. You see what I'm saying? Turned upside down on its head because of this pandemic. And we know that these so-called diseases that man has found himself, or that the human race has found themselves conflicted with, is endemic to the European populations. So when we take a look at typhus, syphilis, smallpox. Now see, this was so crazy. People who call themselves black historians already admit that when you first engaged or first interacted with these so-called Europeans, the first thing that they gave you was smallpox infected blankets. That's chemical and biological warfare. When has it stopped? That's what's so incredible to me. So if you know, and historically what they're saying their greatest weapon is, you know they have a concept called if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this is what they continue to do and they will continue to keep doing it until the agenda is complete, because this science is going, you believe in their science and the real science is going over your head. And the real science is going over your head. So when you take a look at these, like we talked about, substantiating that these was, and we already know this, the layman understands that these diseases were endemic to European populations. So how did black people become the face of disease? We already know, to the victors goes the spoils, and one of the spoils is deeper than materialistic value. It is the control of information. Because it don't matter if you can acquire something, can you keep it? Can you maintain it? That requires information. Okay, so they knew they had to control or propagate to the rest of the world how they acquired this empire, which would go a long way into making sure that those who became the subjects would always know that what role they played or what position they were in. And they had to believe in the science and the religion to do that. Once religion waned in its power, then here came science. Roaring like a wild lion. Subduing the minds of our people. And especially theirs. Because innately, they know that they have no other real options rather to take than to just actually believe in that science. Because it actually what helps them. They can artificially design, even they are, thinking about this world like, man, when it's robots and it's just that they are obsessed with this AI matrix that they feel will encourage the first leap into transhumanism. They're obsessed with that. When you naturally have these things. They're like, this is the future. Get it, embrace it. The world is going to. No, why would we embrace something that will destroy the way that nature really is just for you to substitute it with an artificial environment? And you do that by embracing their science. So we're not, one thing that we're going to do, we're going to go off into an article before we ran off on a tangent and stuff. Sorry about that. But we're going to go into an article that talks about that, and we're going to show you exactly how they go about doing these things, because this is finna get deep, man. I'm finna tell y'all, and I don't got too much time, so I really want to make sure I get this stuff down. Now, brilliance and blind luck. How did medieval Europe invent the concept of quarantine? That was in let's see, that's dark. That was in, I don't know why that title is dark. Too much where I can't see it. Well, I'll put that source in the link. It goes on to say, so that's a picture of that's the title. And you can look it up by its title too as well. But it goes on to say that in the aftermath of the Justinian plague, trade collapsed. Cities shrank to small towns. The population of Rome, perhaps 1 million at the time of the Caesars, fell to 30,000 a millennium later. So 1,000 years later. By 1,000, they go from 1 million. So this shows you what? This shows you two very important things. That disease is endemic to their population, or natural for their population. And also they're not reproducing. This is what you have to understand. You put 1 million black people somewhere, you're not going to have just 30,000 people 1,000 years later. I'm sorry. I'm just saying. Now, as humanity retreated into the autarky of isolated rural communities, pandemics abated. To be sure, the life of a medieval serf was far from healthy. Nutrition was terrible. Hygiene was worse. Now, this is them. Now, when we say these things, mind you, remember what we talked about? It's you become the guardians of your culture. They don't allow us to do that. They control our image. But if you notice, Blancos will never even let thoughts creep up until the next generation. They are protective of their minds because they know the first ones to the mind is the winner. That's why you see that they'll cut off stuff at its knees. They won't even allow it to be a part of the school curriculum or anything like that because they don't want you getting into their kids' minds. We, on the other hand, we liberal. We'll let them tell our children or teach our children anything. But the fact of the matter is this is what you're dealing with. If we were to say these things, like most conscious community individuals or so-called leaders do, that's one of the few things that they're right about, all of a sudden, this begins to raise some eyebrows, or this begins to be seen as controversial rhetoric. But the reality of it is this is what they know. This is what their history is. So it's like there are plenty of infectious diseases that do not turn into pandemics, and the peasantry of medieval Europe knew many of them. So this is just, when you talk about plagues, if you go to the CDC's website, the definition of a plague is when it spreads to humans and other mammals. So that is the technical definition of a plague. It has to be, so these plagues, you have these ticks and around these rats and, they're spreading these diseases and, they're not reproducing at a high rate. And also they're in regions where they don't even know how to till the land. How can you till the land when you can't be in the sun? What, you gonna do all your work at night? Y'all don't get it. So this is what you're dealing with. So, and that's obviously if you buy into the slavery narrative why you made the best slaves, because you can be in the sun. Stop acting like every variable ain't important. So, what happens is that you see that this is the same way it is now. They control the science, And so ultimately too as well, what they also control is they control our reasoning because we believe in the science. So we just take one side of the argument when we're supposed to be saying, okay, we question it all to begin with. You've seen throughout your history when I just showed, read this article, and you already are familiar with yourselves, that their history is just muddied, and it is just overshadowed by war and disease. Look at all of the plagues, man. You talking about, like, you don't think that would affect somebody? You telling me over 1,000 years, your population goes from 1 million to 30,000? That's all that needs to be talked about. Then we're saying that this is a mainstay of your, characterizing or your growth as a civilization. So if this is a staple of your progress or lack thereof, or at least of your experience, then we have to say that this goes hand in hand with you. How did it become the face of a people who, before they met you, were living and were in the millions, hundreds of millions? Who knows what the number was? But we know for a fact that you knew very well what the number was when you seen all them black and brown faces, just like you see them now. Even when your diseases reign supreme in your thought process, and this is how we're supposed to live our lives out now by making this a mainstay, like this is not going anywhere. They've told you this countless times. So we have to be mindful of it because this is how they had to live. They had to always live ever present of a disease. This is what's so deep. So walk with me on this. They want your life to be how they live their life. Remember, this is projection, but they're actually personifying this concept. They are actually going about making it real to you. So everywhere, black people, what we do, if we ain't worried about our finances and our bills, we worried about our health. And this happens because we believe in their science. And we believe that the routes that they give us are the only routes to liberate ourselves from whatever problems that we go through from entertaining the science. They control both sides of the argument, but we have yet to question the argument itself. So that's what happens. Like we said, diametrically opposed to your existence. Now we go on just a little further, just like I'm gonna show you a couple articles, and then I'm a couple subs too as well sent me some information too that hits home on this. But I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna show you even from the titles, and I'm not even gonna read a lot from these articles. I just want to show you from the titles how ecstatic they are about even the notion of changing, totally interrupting the way that things are set up here in this realm. It says this is from Science Alert. It was published by Science Alert, Michelle Starr, 5th of September 2021. This is the title of it, and the title should just irk you if you're a melanated being. Scientists figured out how and when our sun will die, and it's going to be epic. Who even says something like that? Who's that excited? Because I told you they're going through this process now. They're not waiting. They're excited. Look, let me show you what I'm talking about. So, we go to something that's current, that people are concerned about. Over September 11th, over in Yellowstone Park, they were talking about all the seismic activity that they were feeling around that area, and then also, you have articles like this from El País. I think País means country or the country. Science and Tech. This is the, Canary Islands. It says, authorities warn of possible volcanic eruption on Canary Island of La Palma. Since September 11th, more than 4,200 tremors have been recorded in the area, and they are reportedly growing in intensity. Okay? All right? And then, so, when you think about that, you're like, okay, well, why is that important too as well? Because it is a cooling agent. When you look at this article that was printed on 19th of August 2021 by Paul Vucin, and it's entitled, Massive Volcanoes Could Cool Earth More in a Warming World. Now, people just said in that title. Okay? Massive volcanoes could cool Earth more in a warming world. So remember, they already laid the science out there. The Earth is getting warm. We know how to cool it. We know there's nothing like a volcano that can cool the Earth. But see, and then check out what I'm saying. The article states, there are few forces on Earth more powerful than a large volcanic eruption. At their most potent, volcanoes inject millions of tons of sun-blocking particles high into the atmosphere that can cool Earth for nearly 5 years, endangering crops and leading to years without summer. The most recent, the Philippines Mount Pinatubo eruption in 1991, caused a temporary 0.5 degrees Celsius drop in global temperatures. But so since you know that they know this, and you know that they've been yelling about global warming, then they've been talking about, oh, beware of a volcanic eruption. We think that they're not prophetic. This is what they desire. Because quickly they changed the narrative, and I'm gonna show you how they changed the narrative. And I'm gonna just read this. This was in the Washington Post. The title of it, they were the world's only all-female army. Their descendants are fighting to recapture their humanity. Look at that. Don't that remind you of them women warriors? Don't that remind you of the movie? See, they'll give it to you in movies like the Black Panther, but they won't let you know that this was actually a history. That's why I told you that's why they want you to buy into the slavery narrative. They don't want to tell you that you was warriors. You see what I'm saying? So let's take a look at this right quick. It says, Abami Benin, her step-grandmother could remove a man's head with a curved blade. She could scale a wall of thorns. She devoted her life to defending the king. These details, all true, the elderly woman said, landed in the notes of foreign explorers, but they failed to capture the whole story. We're going to read just a little bit of it, go down in the article. It says, history is often told through the lens of conquerors. Generations of American school children learn more about the 15th century discoveries of Christopher Columbus than his recording of record of enslaving indigenous people. Britain framed its 1897 takeover of a storied West African kingdom as a punitive mission, glossing over the mass theft of priceless bronzes. So, artwork, the story of really, how tenacious these people were in defending themselves. Similarly speaking, so when they came over here to the Americas, they talk about the war with the Indians, but want to make it seem like we were not the Indians. This is important because, if anything, it is letting you know that the argument states that for us, that we were warriors and fighting for our land and for our people, not someone who wanted to be in a position of servitude. Okay, because we know that these people would then impose upon us a way of thinking that would be diametrically opposed to the way that we are supposed to live life. And it's showing itself up now. When you see some people and they can't be in your sun, you already know what they own. You looking at this now when big buildings and clothes and, sunglasses and tinted windows and how people are able to effectively hide from the sun. But then if you were to look at it back then when all of these things didn't happen, you would see our ancestors saw this very clear. And so this is what I want you to realize, is that you're dealing with individuals who are using a science to take this to the next level. That's what you need to know. So when you got these people talking about all of these issues and they're taken away from who we really were, and what we really are, and so who we really were, so we can find out who we really were. And you have them substituting it with the science that's fraudulent, that allows us to do what? Work our way, at an accelerated pace to where they sacrifice our son. Okay, and totally change things to where it is more hospitable for their existence. It will be too late. We have to act now. And see, it has nothing to do with just sitting up here talking about, we're all from different back. No, it has everything to do with the fact that you are the vanguards of this realm. So what if people come to your meetings? It's just showing you that it is time for you to take the lead.